Document Part 1, 1400 words. Rain tapped softly against the windshield, not hard enough to blur the city lights, but just enough to make everything shimmer like it was underwater. The man behind the wheel barely noticed. He'd been driving for nearly an hour without really seeing anything, just letting the hum of the engine and the rhythm of the wipers fill the silence. His suit was still crisp, his shoes still polished, but his mind was miles away, tangled in numbers, meetings, and decisions that felt heavier with every passing day. He wasn't supposed to be in this part of town. Truth was, he'd taken a wrong turn trying to avoid downtown traffic, and instead of turning back, he kept going, almost as if some quiet part of him wanted to get lost for a while. The buildings here were older, worn down at the edges. Porches sagged, fences leaned, streetlights flickered like they were tired of staying on. It was a world away from the sleek glass towers and manicured lobbies he moved through every day. Then, without warning, the car sputtered. He frowned, easing off the gas. The engine coughed once, twice, then fell silent. He coasted to the curb near a narrow alley, the tires crunching over broken glass and wet gravel. He tried the ignition, nothing, just a weak click. Sighing, he leaned his head back against the headrest and rubbed his temples. Of all nights, he stepped out into the damp air, collar turned up against the chill. The street was quiet, too quiet. No music from open windows, no laughter from porches, not even the bark of a dog, just the distant rumble of a train and the occasional drip from a rusted fire escape. He popped the hood, though he knew next to nothing about engines. He just needed to feel like he was doing something. That's when he heard it. A voice, small, sharp, trembling, cut through the stillness like a shard of glass. "Don't hurt us." He froze. It came from a doorway just a few yards away, half hidden by a sagging awning. At first he thought he'd imagined it, but then he saw them, two children pressed against the wall like they were trying to disappear into it. The older one couldn't have been more than 6 or 7, barefoot in faded pajamas, one arm wrapped tightly around a toddler who buried his face in her side. Their eyes, wide, wet, terrified, were locked on him. His heart dropped. He hadn't made a sound. He hadn't moved toward them. But in their eyes he was danger. He saw it instantly. The way their shoulders hunched, the way the little girl's fingers dug into her brother's shirt. They thought he was here to take something. Or worse. Slowly, carefully, he raised both hands, palms out. "Hey," he said, voice softer than he'd used in years. "It's okay. I'm not here to hurt anyone." The girl didn't blink, didn't breathe. She just stared like she was waiting for the trap to spring. He took a small step back. "My car broke down. That's all. I'm just..." Stuck, still silence. Then from inside the apartment, a woman's voice, hoarse with exhaustion, called out, "Lily? You okay out there?" The girl didn't answer. She just kept watching him, her small body rigid. A moment later, a woman appeared in the doorway. She wore an old sweater with a hole near the elbow and slippers that had seen better days. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and dark circles shadowed her eyes. But her stance was firm, protective. She didn't look afraid, not exactly. More like she'd already faced so much fear that she'd run out of room for it. She looked from him to his car, then back to his face. "You lost?" she asked, voice flat but not unkind. "Yeah," he admitted. "Took a wrong turn. Then the car died?" She studied him for a long moment. His coat, his shoes, the way he stood like he owned the sidewalk just by standing on it. He saw the calculation in her eyes. Rich man, expensive car, middle of the night. In a neighborhood where strangers rarely stopped unless they wanted something. "We thought you were someone else," she said finally, glancing at the kids. "Someone who's been..." Coming around, he didn't ask who. He didn't need to. The fear in the little girl's voice said enough. "I'm not," he said simply. "I swear." She nodded once, like that was all she needed to hear. "There's a garage 2 blocks over. They tow at night. I can give you the number." He thanked her and pulled out his phone. She recited the digits slowly and he typed them in, careful not to rush. The whole time, the little girl watched him, her grip on her brother never loosening. When he finished, he hesitated. "You need anything, water?" "I've got bottled water in the car." She shook her head. "We're fine." But as she turned to go back inside, the front door swung open a little wider and he saw it. A single bare bulb hanging from the ceiling. A threadbare rug on cracked linoleum. A pot on the stove with nothing in it. Toys made from bottle caps and string. and a window patched with cardboard where the glass should have been. Something inside him twisted. He wanted to say more, to offer help, money, something, but he knew it would sound hollow. Or worse, like pity, and this woman didn't look like she accepted either, so he just nodded. "Thanks for the number," she gave a small, tired smile. "Be safe." Then the door closed, soft but final. He stood there for a long time, rain soaking into his shoulders, staring at that door like it held a secret he wasn't ready to understand. When the tow truck finally arrived, he barely spoke to the driver. He gave directions in short sentences, climbed into the cab without looking back, and watched the street fade in the rearview mirror. But the image stayed. The little girl's scream. The way she shielded her brother. The cardboard in the window. The quiet strength in the mother's voice. Back in his high-rise apartment, the city stretched out below him like a glittering map of everything he'd built. He poured a drink, sat by the window, and stared at his reflection in the glass. For the first time in years, he didn't see success. He saw distance. Layers of comfort, routine, and control that had kept the real world at arm's length. And for the first time, that distance felt like a loss. He didn't sleep that night. Not really. Every time he closed his eyes, he heard that voice again. Small, scared, and so full of trust that had been broken too many times before. "Don't hurt us." 3 words. That was all it took. By morning, he knew he couldn't just forget what he'd seen. Not because he owed them anything, but because for the first time in a long time, he remembered what it felt like to be human. Not powerful, not important, just human. And that was enough to make him want to go back. Document, Part 2, 1800 words. The next morning, sunlight poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows of his apartment, bright and indifferent. It lit up the marble countertops, the designer furniture, the framed awards on the wall. Everything polished, perfect, and utterly quiet. He sat at the kitchen island with a cup of coffee that had long gone cold, staring at nothing. His phone buzzed twice with messages from his assistant, then again with a calendar reminder for a board meeting. He ignored them all. What stayed with him wasn't just the fear in that little girl's eyes. It was the way her mother had stood in that doorway. Not begging, not angry, just tired, like she'd been carrying something heavy for so long that she'd forgotten what it felt like to set it down. He'd spent years building a life where problems had solutions. Hire someone, write a check, make a call. But this wasn't that kind of problem. You couldn't fix exhaustion with money. You couldn't buy back safety once it was gone. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that he should do something. Not as a grand gesture, no cameras, no speeches, but just something real. By midday, he was back in the neighborhood. He parked a few blocks away this time in a lot behind a closed laundromat and walked. He wore a plain jacket, no watch, no flashy shoes, just a man trying not to stand out. The streets were livelier in daylight. Kids on bikes with training wheels, an old man sweeping his porch. The smell of frying onions drifting from an open window. It felt normal, human. The kind of place people lived, not just passed through. He found the building easily. Same sagging awning, same cracked steps. This time there was laundry hanging on a line strung between 2 windows. Small shirts, tiny socks, all faded but clean. He lingered across the street, not sure what he was waiting for. A sign, permission? He didn't know. Then the front door opened. The woman stepped out, pulling on a thin coat, a tote bag slung over her shoulder. She locked the door carefully, checked it twice, then turned and saw him. For a second she stopped. Not startled, not scared, just wary, like she was trying to place him. "It's me," he said gently, stepping forward just enough to be seen clearly. "From last night. My car broke down." Recognition flickered in her eyes. She relaxed just a little. "Oh, right. I came back," he said, then immediately felt foolish. Of course he came back, that's why he was standing there. But why? He hadn't planned what to say. She waited, arms crossed, not unfriendly but not inviting either. "I just wanted to make sure you were okay," he said finally, "after last night." She gave a small, tired laugh. "We're always okay." "We have to be," he nodded. There was no bitterness in her voice, just fact. Like saying the sky is blue or the bus runs late. "I also wanted to thank you," he added, "for the tow number. They got me home quick." "Good," she said. Then after a pause, "You didn't have to come back." I know, he admitted. But I wanted to. She studied him again like she was deciding whether to trust the quiet honesty in his voice. Finally, she sighed. Look, I appreciate it, really, but we don't need anything. We've got what we need, he believed her. But he also saw the way her coat sleeves were frayed at the cuffs, the way she shifted her weight like her shoes hurt. Even so, he said, if there's ever something, groceries, help with repairs, anything, I'd like to help. No strings, she looked down, then back up. People say that. Then they want something in return. A story, a photo, a thank you on camera. I don't, he said quickly. I'm not looking for anything. Not even your name, that seemed to surprise her. She blinked, then gave a slow nod. All right, then. Thank you. They stood there in the quiet for a moment, the city humming around them. I work nights, she said suddenly, as if offering a piece of the puzzle, at a diner about 20 minutes from here. Days are hard, but we manage. He didn't ask about the father. Didn't ask about bills or landlords or who had scared them enough to scream at a stranger. He just listened. I used to work in construction, he said, surprising himself. Before all this. He gestured vaguely toward his clothes, his car parked blocks away. Back then, I knew what it felt like to wonder if the next paycheck would cover rent. She looked at him, really looked, like she was seeing past the expensive jacket for the first time. Things change, she said softly. Yeah, he said. But not everyone gets the same chance to change with them. She didn't answer right away. Then quietly, my kids haven't done anything wrong. They shouldn't have to be afraid in their own home. Her voice cracked just a little on the last word. She looked away, blinking fast. He felt that crack like it was in his own chest. I'm sorry, he said, and he meant it, not as a rich man apologizing for poverty, but as one person sorry that another had to carry so much alone. She nodded, swallowed, then straightened her shoulders. Well, I've got to get to work. Double shift today. Of course, he said. I won't keep you. She started to walk past, then stopped. If you really want to help, there's a food pantry 2 blocks over. They're always short on diapers and formula, and they never turn anyone away. He remembered the toddler clinging to his sister's leg. I'll go there today. She gave a small, genuine smile, just a flicker, but it reached her eyes. Thanks. And just like that, she was gone, walking fast but not running, like she had places to be but time enough to get there. He stood there for a while, watching her disappear around the corner. Then he turned and walked toward the pantry. It was a small brick building with peeling paint and a hand-painted sign that read, Community Hands, Open Twos and Fry. Inside, shelves held canned goods, pasta, rice, and a few boxes of baby supplies. A woman with silver hair and kind eyes greeted him from behind a folding table. Looking to donate or pick up? She asked. Donate, he said. Diapers, formula, whatever you need most. Her face lit up. Bless you. We had a family come in this morning with triplets, brand new, and nothing but the clothes on their backs. He didn't ask questions. He just pulled out his phone, called a nearby store, and ordered 2 full carts of baby supplies, groceries, and cleaning items. Paid on the spot. Asked them to deliver it directly to the pantry by noon. As he left, the woman at the desk called after him. You're a good soul. He almost laughed. He didn't feel like a good soul. He felt like someone who'd been asleep for years and had just opened his eyes. That evening, instead of heading home, he drove back to the neighborhood. Not to the apartment, just to sit in his car a block away and watch. He saw kids playing hopscotch on the sidewalk, a neighbor sharing soup with another, the woman returning from work, her steps slower now, but her arms full of a paper bag, probably leftovers from the diner. He noticed things he hadn't before. The way people greeted each other by name, the way someone always checked on the elderly man on the 3rd floor, the way laughter still found its way through cracked windows. This wasn't just a place of struggle, it was a place of life. Over the next few days he returned, not every day, not too often, but enough to become a quiet presence. He fixed the broken step on their porch one afternoon when no one was home, leaving tools and extra wood by the door. He dropped off winter coats at the pantry, labeled for 2 small kids. He even started eating breakfast at the diner where she worked, not to see her, but because it felt honest to sit among people who worked hard for every dollar. One morning she brought him coffee without asking. Black, right? She said, setting it down. He smiled. Yeah, how'd you know? You look like a black coffee kind of guy. They shared a quiet laugh. No big moment. Just two people sharing a sliver of normalcy. Then one rainy evening, he saw the lights on in their apartment. He'd been walking by, umbrella in hand, when the front door opened. The little girl stood there. Same pajamas, same wide eyes. But this time, she didn't scream, she just looked at him, and then, very softly, she said, "Hi." His breath caught. He crouched down slowly, keeping his distance. "Hi," he said back. She glanced behind her, then stepped onto the porch, barefoot again. "Mom says you helped." "I tried," he said. "She says you're not like the others." "What others?" he asked gently. She didn't answer. Just hugged herself and looked at the wet sidewalk. He didn't push. He just stayed quiet, giving her space. After a long moment, she whispered, "They came last week. Big men, said we had to leave. But we can't." He felt a cold anger rise, but he kept his voice calm. "Did they hurt you?" She shook her head fast. "No, but they yelled. And they broke the window." She pointed to the cardboard patch. "Mom cried after they left. But she didn't let us see." He swallowed hard. "I'm so sorry you had to see that." She looked up at him then, really looked. "Are you going to make them go away?" He wished he could promise that. But promises were dangerous when you couldn't keep them. "I can't make them disappear," he said honestly. "But I can help make sure you're safe. And that you have a place to stay." She studied him like she was deciding if he meant it. Then, with the seriousness only a child who's grown up too fast can have, she nodded. "Okay." That one word, "okay," felt heavier than any contract he'd ever signed. When her mother called her back inside, the girl went without protest. But before the door closed, she turned and gave him the smallest wave. He stood there in the rain, heart pounding, not from fear but from something deeper, responsibility, connection, hope. He walked back to his car, mind racing. He couldn't fix everything, but he could start with what mattered most: safety, stability, dignity. And for the first time in a long time, he knew exactly what to do next. Document Part 3, 1,800 words. He didn't sleep much that night. Not because he was anxious, but because his mind wouldn't stop turning over the pieces of a puzzle he'd only just begun to see. The fear in that little girl's voice wasn't random. It wasn't just about being poor or living in a rough neighborhood. It was about power, about people who thought they could take what they wanted because no one would stop them. And the worst part? They were usually right, but this time maybe not. He'd spent his whole adult life building walls around his time, his emotions, his personal life. Success to him had always meant control, knowing the outcome before the game even started. Yet here he was, standing in the middle of something messy, uncertain, and deeply human, and for the first time he didn't want to control it. He just wanted to be part of it. The next morning, he skipped his usual breakfast meeting. Instead, he drove to a small law office on the edge of the city, one he'd heard about through a friend who worked in housing advocacy. The place wasn't fancy. No marble floors or receptionists in designer suits, just a cluttered waiting room with mismatched chairs and a coffee pot that had seen better days. A woman in her 50s greeted him, her eyes sharp but kind behind wire-rimmed glasses. She listened without interrupting as he explained what he'd seen: the broken window, the threats, the family living in fear. He didn't mention names, didn't exaggerate, just laid out the facts like he was handing over a blueprint. When he finished, she leaned back in her chair. "This sounds like illegal eviction pressure, maybe even intimidation. If they're not the legal owners or law enforcement, they have no right to threaten anyone. Can you help them?" he asked. "I can try," she said, "but they'll need to talk to me directly. And they'll need proof, texts, recordings, witness statements. People like that don't leave paper trails, but sometimes neighbors remember things." He nodded. "I'll ask if they're willing." She studied him for a moment. "You're not family." "Not a friend." "Why are you doing this?" He thought about it. "Because someone should." She gave a small smile. "That's rare. But it's enough." Back in the neighborhood, he didn't go straight to their building. He walked around first, talking to people, casually, respectfully. He bought a soda from the corner store, chatted with the man fixing his bike on the porch, asked an older woman if she'd seen anything unusual lately. Most were cautious at first, but when they realized he wasn't selling anything or asking for favors, they opened up. One neighbor, a retired teacher who'd lived on the block for 30 years, told him about a man in a dark sedan who'd been circling the building for weeks. Said he was collecting on behalf of the new management, she said, voice tight with disapproval. But there's no new management. Same landlord for 20 years. Sweet old man who lives in Florida and barely raises the rent. That was the break he needed. Armed with that detail, he returned to the apartment in the late afternoon. This time he brought groceries, milk, eggs, bread, fruit, and a small box of art supplies for the kids. When the woman opened the door, she looked surprised but not suspicious. "You keep showing up with things," she said, half smiling. "I keep finding reasons to," he replied. She let him in. The apartment was small, just 2 rooms, but clean and filled with little signs of care. Drawings taped to the fridge, a handmade quilt on the couch, books stacked neatly by the bed. The toddler played quietly on the floor with a toy car, while the older girl watched from the doorway, eyes curious but no longer afraid. He set the groceries on the counter. "I spoke to a lawyer today," he said gently. "Someone who helps families facing threats like the ones you described." Her expression shifted, hope mixed with fear. "What can she do?"
"She can't make them vanish," he said honestly.
"But if they're breaking the law, she can help stop them. Maybe even get a restraining order, but she'll need you to talk to her. And maybe some neighbors who've seen what's happening." She sat down slowly at the small kitchen table, hands folded in her lap. "I've been so scared to say anything. What if it makes it worse?" "I asked her the same thing," he said. "She told me that silence usually makes it worse, but standing together, even quietly, makes you stronger." The little girl wandered over and leaned against her mother's leg. "Will they come back?" she asked softly. Her mother wrapped an arm around her. "I don't know, baby." He crouched down again at eye level. "I can't promise they won't try, but I can promise you won't be alone if they do." The girl looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded like she believed him. Later, over tea that tasted faintly of cinnamon, the woman told him more. The men had come 3 times. Always at night. Always loud. They claimed the building had been sold, that everyone had to be out in 30 days. But no paperwork. No notices. Just threats and smashed glass. They said if we didn't leave, they'd come back with real help, she whispered. I didn't know who to call. The police? They barely come around here unless someone's hurt. He felt a knot tighten in his chest. This wasn't just about rent or property. It was about who gets protected and who gets ignored. "I'll go with you to meet the lawyer," he offered. "If you want." She looked at him. Really looked, like she was seeing not just the man in front of her, but the choice he was offering. To stop carrying this alone. "Okay," she said finally. "Let's do it." The meeting happened 2 days later in the lawyer's office. He waited outside while they talked, pacing the sidewalk like a nervous parent. When they came out, the woman's shoulders were straighter. The lawyer had filed a formal complaint with the city housing authority and contacted the actual landlord, who was furious and promised to investigate. "It's not over," the lawyer warned. "But now there's a record. And if those men show up again, you call 911. And you tell them you've already reported illegal eviction attempts." That changes everything. That night he sat in his car outside the building again, not to watch, but just to be near. He knew the threats might not stop overnight. But something had shifted. The family wasn't hiding anymore. They were standing even if it was just a little taller. Over the next week he kept his distance but stayed involved. He helped the woman apply for emergency housing assistance. He connected her with a job training program that offered childcare. He even arranged for a local handyman, someone he trusted, to replace the broken window with real glass. No questions asked. One evening, as he was leaving after dropping off school supplies, the little girl ran out to meet him. "Look," she said, holding up a drawing. It showed a tall man with a car, a mom, 2 kids, and a house with a bright yellow sun above it. In wobbly letters at the bottom it read, "Safe now." He felt his throat tighten. "Did you draw this?" he asked. She nodded. "For you. 'Cause you helped." He took it carefully like it was made of glass. "I'll keep it forever." She beamed, then ran back inside before he could say more. Back in his apartment that night, he taped the drawing to his fridge, right in the center, where he'd see it every morning. It wasn't just a child's art, it was a reminder. Real change doesn't happen in boardrooms. It happens in doorways, in whispered conversations, in the quiet courage of people who refuse to be erased. And for the first time, he didn't feel like an outsider looking in. He felt like he belonged, not because he'd fixed everything, but because he'd shown up when it mattered. Still, he knew the hardest part was coming. Because helping wasn't just about solving a crisis. It was about walking alongside someone long after the cameras would have left, if there ever were any. And he was ready to walk. Document Part 4, 1800 words. Weeks passed, and the rhythm of life in the neighborhood settled into something steadier. The threats hadn't returned, not yet at least, but the family still jumped at loud noises, still locked the door 3 times before bed. Healing, he was learning, wasn't a straight line. It was more like stitching a torn piece of fabric, slow, careful, and sometimes you had to undo a few stitches to get it right. He kept visiting, but less often now, not because he cared less, but because he wanted them to feel like they were standing on their own. He'd drop by with groceries every other week, always knocking first, always waiting for an invitation inside. Sometimes they'd chat over tea. Sometimes he'd just hand over the bag and wave to the kids playing on the porch. It wasn't charity. It was consistency. And that, he was starting to understand, mattered more than grand gestures. One rainy Saturday, he found the woman sitting on the front steps, staring at a letter in her hands. Her shoulders were slumped and her eyes looked tired in a way that went deeper than lack of sleep. "You okay?" he asked, stopping a few feet away. She looked up startled, then managed a small smile. "Yeah, just life stuff." He didn't push, just sat down on the step below her, giving her space. After a long silence, she spoke. "My husband left 2 years ago, right after our youngest was born. Said he couldn't handle it, the bills, the stress, the feeling like he was failing us." She let out a breath that sounded more like a sigh than air. "I was angry for a long time. Then I just got tired." He listened, not to fix it, just to hear her. "He wasn't a bad man," she went on, "just broken." And instead of trying to mend, he walked away. She looked down at the letter again. "This is from his sister. Says he's been sick. Living in a shelter, wants to see the kids." Her voice cracked on the last word. He didn't say anything for a moment. Then gently, "Do you want him to?" She shook her head, then nodded, then shook it again. "I don't know. Part of me says no after everything. How can I trust him with them? But another part remembers the man he was before the world wore him down. And I wonder if the kids deserve to know that man too." It was the most honest thing she'd ever said to him, and it hit him harder than he expected. Because it wasn't just about her husband. It was about forgiveness, about second chances, about whether people could change or if some wounds just stayed open forever. "I don't have answers," he said finally. "But I do know this, you've kept them safe. You've loved them when no one else did. Whatever you decide, it'll be the right choice because it'll come from love, not fear." She looked at him, eyes glistening. "How'd you get so wise?" He almost laughed. "I'm not wise. I just spent too many years pretending I had it all together, while missing what really mattered." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "You ever think about what your life would have been like if things had gone differently?" "All the time," he admitted. "I grew up not far from here, actually. My dad worked 2 jobs. Mom cleaned houses. We didn't have much, but we had each other. Then I got lucky. A scholarship, a mentor, a break at the right time. But somewhere along the way, I started believing success meant leaving all that behind." "And now?" she asked. "Now I see that the real luck wasn't the money. It was having people who believed in me when I didn't believe in myself." He glanced toward the window, where the kids were drawing at the kitchen table. "Maybe that's what I'm trying to give back. Not stuff, just belief." She was quiet for a long time. Then she folded the letter and tucked it into her pocket. "I'll think about it," she said. "But not today," he nodded. "Good. Today you've already done enough." Later that evening, as he walked back to his car, he realized something. He wasn't just helping them anymore. They were helping him too. They'd reminded him that strength isn't about never falling, it's about getting up. Again and again, even when your knees are scraped and your heart is heavy. A few days later, the lawyer called with news. The city had confirmed the building hadn't been sold. The men who'd been threatening tenants were linked to a shady property flipping group, known for pushing out low-income renters through intimidation. Because of the complaint and statements from 3 neighbors, the group was now under investigation. If convicted, they could face fines, even jail time. "It's not over," the lawyer warned, "but it's a start." When he shared the news with the woman, she didn't cheer. She just closed her eyes for a moment, like she was letting go of a breath she'd been holding for months. "They won't come back," she said softly. "Not now." He hoped she was right. But the real turning point came on a quiet Tuesday afternoon. He'd brought books for the kids, picture books for the little one, chapter books for the older girl, and was about to knock when the door opened before he could. The girl stood there holding a cup of something steaming. "Mom made hot chocolate," she said, holding it out. "She said you always come in the rain, so you must like it." He took the cup, surprised. "Thank you." She didn't step back right away. Instead, she looked up at him with those serious eyes. "Are you our friend?" The question caught him off guard. Not because it was hard, but because it was so simple. "I'd like to be," he said. She thought about it, then nodded. "Okay, friends help each other." "They do," he agreed. Inside, the woman was folding laundry, but she smiled when she saw him. "She's been waiting for you to come by," she said, nodding toward her daughter. "Says you promised to teach her how to tie her shoes the grown-up way." He hadn't promised that, but he wasn't about to say no now. So he sat on the floor, showed her the loops and pulls, let her try a dozen times until she got it. When she finally did, she jumped up, beaming. "I did it." "You sure did," he said, grinning. And in that moment, something shifted, not dramatically, not with fanfare, but deeply. He wasn't the stranger in the expensive car anymore. He was just there, part of the quiet fabric of their days. Later, as he helped the woman hang laundry on the line, she said, "You know, most people would have driven away that night, pretended they didn't hear her scream." "Most people don't get the chance to do something real," he replied. She looked at him, then out at the street. The kids laughing down the block, the neighbor watering her plants, the sun breaking through the clouds after days of rain. "Maybe," she said. "The real chance was yours." He didn't answer right away. But as he walked home that evening, her words stayed with him. Because she was right. He'd thought he was giving something. But what he'd received, the trust, the honesty, the reminder that no one should have to be afraid in their own home, that was the real gift. And it had broken his heart open in the best possible way. Document, Part 5, 1,800 words. Spring came quietly that year. No fanfare, just longer days, warmer air, and the first green shoots pushing through cracks in the sidewalk. The neighborhood felt different now. Not because everything was fixed. Life rarely works that way. But because hope had taken root again. People stood a little taller on their porches. Kids played later into the evening, and the apartment with the once cardboard window now had real glass, clean curtains, and a small potted plant on the sill. He still visited, but things had changed between them, not in a bad way, just in the natural way relationships grow when trust is earned slowly. He wasn't a rescuer. He wasn't a stranger. He was just there, a steady presence like the old oak tree on the corner that everyone passed but no one questioned. One Saturday morning, he arrived to find the older girl waiting on the steps, holding a folded piece of paper. She ran to him before he even reached the walkway. "I made you something," she said, breathless with excitement. He crouched down. "You didn't have to. I wanted to." She pressed the paper into his hands. "Open it." He unfolded it carefully. It was a drawing, bright colors, careful lines. In the center stood a tall figure with kind eyes and a car that looked suspiciously like his. Beside him were two kids holding hands, and behind them, a house with a red door and a sun that took up half the sky. At the bottom, in careful letters, "Thank you for not being scary." He felt his chest tighten, not with sadness, but with something deeper. Gratitude, maybe, or awe at how much a child's heart could hold. "I'll keep this with the other one," he said softly. "Right on my fridge," she beamed. "Mom says you helped us find our brave again." He looked up and saw the woman in the doorway watching them with a quiet smile. She'd started a new job the week before, part-time at a community center with benefits and child care. She'd also enrolled in night classes, something she'd dreamed of doing for years but never thought possible. She wasn't rich. She wasn't fixed, but she was moving forward, step by careful step. Later, over coffee at the kitchen table, the real kind, brewed in a chipped pot, he asked how she was really doing. "Better," she said, wrapping her hands around her mug. "Not perfect, but better. The lawyer says the case against those men is strong. And the landlord? He actually came by last month. Fixed the leak in the ceiling, repainted the hallway. Said he's sorry he didn't pay closer attention. He should be," he said gently. She nodded. "But I don't want to live angry anymore. It's too heavy." He understood that more than she knew. For years, he'd carried his own kind of weight. The belief that success meant never looking back, never showing weakness, never needing anyone. But standing in this small kitchen, surrounded by mismatched mugs and crayon drawings taped to the wall, he realized how empty that kind of success really was. "What are you going to do now?" she asked, studying him. He thought about it. "I've been thinking a lot about that. I used to measure my life in deals closed, assets grown, meetings won, but none of that matters if you're not connected to people. Real people. Not contacts, not clients, just humans," she smiled. "So what's next?" "I'm starting something small," he said. "A fund, not flashy, no press, just to help families like yours get legal help, housing support, job training. Quiet help, the kind that doesn't make you feel like you owe someone your story." Her eyes softened. "That's a good thing." "It's the least I can do," he said. "No," she corrected gently. "It's exactly what you're meant to do." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the kids laugh in the other room. Outside, a neighbor called out a greeting. A dog barked. Life, ordinary and beautiful, went on. When it was time to leave, he didn't say goodbye like it was final. He just stood, zipped his jacket, and ruffled the little girl's hair as he passed. "See you soon," she said, already back to her coloring book. "Count on it," he replied. He walked to his car, but instead of driving straight home, he parked a few blocks away and sat for a while, watching the street come alive in the golden afternoon light. Kids rode bikes. An old man swept his porch. Someone played piano through an open window, simple notes slightly off-key but full of joy, and in that moment he felt it, the quiet ache he'd carried since that rainy night months ago. But it wasn't pain anymore. It was the feeling of a heart that had been closed for too long finally opening up. Not all at once, not perfectly, but enough. He thought about the scream that had stopped him in his tracks. "Don't hurt us." 3 words that had unraveled his carefully built world and stitched it back together with threads of humility, compassion, and purpose. He hadn't saved them. That wasn't how real life worked. But he'd shown up, listened, stayed. And in doing so, they'd saved something in him too. Back in his apartment that evening, he didn't pour a drink or scroll through emails. He stood by the window, looking out at the city glittering below, and for the first time, he didn't see a map of power or wealth. He saw people, millions of them, each with their own quiet battles, their own hopes tucked away like folded notes in a pocket. And he knew, with a certainty that settled deep in his bones, that his legacy wouldn't be measured in buildings or bank accounts. It would be measured in moments like these, in the courage to stop when someone screams, to kneel when a child is afraid, to give without expecting anything back. The next week, he met with a small nonprofit that worked with families facing housing insecurity. He didn't write a giant check and walk away. Instead, he sat at their worn conference table, listened to their challenges, and offered not just money but his time, his network, his voice. He also started visiting other neighborhoods not to fix them but to leer,